Alrighty, let's do this. Just waiting for more people to roll in, and then we're gonna get right into the topic. So, hope you're all doing well. And I'm sure you've got plenty to say about this. I mean, who doesn't, right? Favorite tropes, or least favorite, or most hated, or what have you. There's going to be plenty of talking points, I'm sure. Let's see, we've got a few things here already. I gotta say, I don't know if you're gonna do it, but the hate for sexy armor is kind of played out, in my opinion. There is room for every type of fantasy armor. There's room for anything in fantasy. That's kind of the point. That's why it's fantasy. So it's not really much of an argument. Like, a trope, a fantasy trope is still fantasy. It's still part of the package, so to speak. It's just how much do you dislike it? And I dislike it quite significantly. I mean, on the one hand. On the other hand, I also find it kind of appealing for obvious reasons. But we'll get back to that in a moment. I just want to wait until more people have had a chance to roll in. But, yeah. Here's a low-hanging fruit. I really dislike armor with spikes on it, especially on shoulder area and helmet. Yes. Yes, indeed. In fact, some armor is covered in spikes all around, and sometimes in crucial areas, and sometimes they're so long and large in general that you wouldn't be able to move properly because stuff binds up. So, yeah, there are definitely some issues. Sometimes the shoulder spikes are so long that they're getting close to the helmet, so you wouldn't be able to do this, or, you know, you might not even be able to turn around because the helmet is bulky too, and then you've got spikes everywhere. It's like, yeah. That is definitely an overused trope. I clearly dislike excessive weaponry and armor. Clearly makes the wearer look like a midget. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes. And what I also find particularly bizarre is when the armor is so huge that you can tell that the person inside would have some really weird anatomy. You know what I mean? Like, if you actually trace where the limbs supposedly are, it doesn't make any sense. They would be like Stretch Armstrong, basically, in there. Like, the shoulders are way too far apart, and, you know, stuff like this. There would be some real monstrosities. I'm pretty sure I have a picture of that somewhere for reference. I was pretty sure I had something here. Let me see. Not there. Question is where? Because I've got so many folders with video ideas and materials for videos and streams and all of this. Not that. No. I had something here somewhere that's exactly this. Oh, there it is. I got it. Here, a second. Let's open this up. Well, Earth and View doesn't wanna, but I might as well just open it a different way. That's okay. We can manage. We can manage technical difficulties. No problem. So what was the folder called again? There. Hilariously Impractical Fantasy Armor. Huh. Of course. And right here. This one. That's a good example. Like, if you actually trace the person inside of this, it's like, What? How do they fit into this? How do they fill out this armor? Presumably. It's like if you look at the distance, like the distance between the shoulder joints here, look at how far they're away from anything. Like, huh? And then, of course, you have gigantic pauldrons and this minuscule little waist that's also mostly unarmored compared to the rest. That would snap in half under all that weight. And then, of course, the hip is also astronomically wide. So if you trace this, the outlines of the body that's supposedly inside of it, that's some kind of slime thing. Some kind of, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, thanks, Chad, man. I like leather armor if it's a monster whose hide is almost impossible to penetrate, that it needs a special weapon / spell, especially if you boil it after you get the leather. Yeah, sure, why not? Thanks, Frank. I have to admit I have an ongoing obsession with axes that comes up every now and then. Right now it's mostly on battle axes. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with axes. Yeah. So, going back to the earlier point about sexy armor. So, obviously, it is a big part of fantasy. And obviously, my straight male brain looks at this like, yum, you know, approved, but my frontal cortex does not approve at all. It's more like, it's such a dumb trope. I'm not talking about like scantily clad fighters or whatever in general. You can make arguments in favor of, you know, barbarians and whatever like specific archetypes and unit types and classes and whatnot. Just saying screw armor for whatever reason, whether they want the mobility or whether they just want to show off their courage and blah, this and that and whatever. It's all fine and good. But using little pieces of armor that cover parts of the body and then, you know, leave the essentials uncovered, you know, like the very big obvious essentials, or rather what's behind them. It's just, even within fantasy, that makes absolutely no sense. Even in any kind of fantasy context, this should still be regarded as absolutely stupid and what the hell are you doing? Right? I mean, come on. Like, do you want armor or do you not want it? You kind of got to decide. You know, it's like if somebody asks you, like, are you a handheld gamer or mobile gamer or whatever, or are you, or other way around, are you a laptop user or a desktop user? And you just end up carrying your tower around. It doesn't do shit because it doesn't even have power. You can't use it. You don't have a monitor. You're just carrying it around, pretending to be mobile, but it's not a laptop. It doesn't do any of the things that either a desktop or a laptop does. It's just idiocy. Like, you get where I'm going here? Like, literally the only purpose, the only justification for this existence here is sexy. It's like, yeah, you can have sexy characters in all kinds of ways. You can appeal to the horny neckbeards in a wide variety of ways that make more sense. Right? That's why I hate this trope. So, rebuttals, opinions, comments, whatever. This is a case to have just gauntlets. Yeah, I agree. Might as well. Thanks, Frank. Truth be told, it's weapons in general. I'm just an addict toward things that are either sharp blades or loud weapons that shoot bullets. That's fair. Thanks, Chad, man. Bikini armor is yucking stupid. Still being creative with the censorship there. You want bits and pieces of armor, fine, but at least have it cover the essential areas of the body like chest, head, arms, and so on. Yeah. Right? I think it's fine if this kind of armor isn't exclusive to females. I would still find it dumb. Like, if there was a dude running around with exactly this setup, pauldrons, gauntlets, and, like, something, I don't know, some small piece on the nipples, and some sort of plate girdle, I would still call it stupid. Just as stupid and ridiculous. Oh, no helmet, too. Of course. Why would you wear a helmet? Yeah. Let's just decide. You can do a sexy look, or you can do armor. Don't try both. It's dumb. It's like dudes running around in nothing but a codpiece. Codpiece and greaves. Mm-hmm. Realistically, most female warriors are a poor fantasy trope. I disagree. If you look at real life, yeah, sure, you know, if you compare like the top ranking male MMA fighter versus female MMA fighter, yeah, the male fighter is most likely gonna steamroll. Like, again, top tier we're talking here. But if we're actually looking at fighters of equivalent weight, if you have a male and a female who are in the same weight class, there suddenly isn't that much of a gap anymore. And you have plenty of differences in strength and weight between individual dudes too. So, and especially considering that, you know, a fantasy world, like, it's not planet Earth, it's a potentially different species, or, you know, different circumstances, different whatever. I think that's actually pretty easy to accept. That doesn't strain suspension of disbelief all that much. Whereas bikini armor does. Modern day people are like soft pudding in comparison to the days of swordplay and pre-combustive force tools. The average person, yes. It's like a lot of, you know, average people / office drones, whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Like, even just compared to working class people back then, absolutely. But on the other hand, if you look at like top tier athletes nowadays, I do think they can consistently beat everybody in history pretty much in terms of athletic performance, simply because nutrition is better and, you know, exercise science is a thing now. So things are much more optimized, much more efficient. So there's that. There are videos of female MMA fighters bashing guys who are in the same weight category. Yeah, I mean, it's to be expected. The main difference is going to be individual difference, you know, between skill levels. But, you know, as long as the weight class is about the same, then there you go. It's like a dude wearing a condom in combat. In combat. Sorry, combat for protection. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, there are plenty of other things, of course. Let me actually just check a few other comments, because I haven't really given you that much time to provide counter arguments and whatnot. if you feel like it. Personally, I find it a bit annoying that nobody in fantasy stories wears helmets. Like in so many TV shows, I'm just sitting there thinking half of the soldiers lived if they had helmets. Yeah, helmets are just, you gotta show the face, you gotta show the main character, blah, whatever, you know? If literally naked warriors existed, then isn't any armor better than no armor at all? No, not really, because it's going to hinder you. Like now you have some of the disadvantages of armor with very little of the benefit. Particularly since in this case right here, she's not, you can clearly tell she's not wearing anything under the plate. Like there's no padding, there's not even clothing, there's literally nothing underneath. So just imagine the amount of chafing, especially nipple chafing, but just overall the amount of sheer discomfort, and also the fact that now the armor doesn't protect you anywhere near as well because it's still gonna beat you up. You might still get broken bones and whatnot underneath. But now you can't move anywhere near as well as you could before. So I would argue this is legit a case of it's worse than nothing. Natural padding, yeah, indeed. She does have that, doesn't she? Since armor generally offers the protection of wet paper, she at least looks nice. Yeah, there's that. If armor is paper mache, then whatever. You might as well use it as fashion accessories. Very awkward to wear fashion accessories. I mean, the gauntlets give her an advantage. Yeah, a slight one. Unfortunately, it's fingered gauntlets, which are nowhere near as protective as mitten gauntlets, but it's something. It's probably still gonna have broken fingers, but it's something. You know, these like glancing blows and, you know, cuts from light blades, yeah, it's gonna be okay generally. If they happen to hit those few armor parts, that is. Especially shaped pieces of padding could be attached to the inside. Well, not as far as we see, because we can look inside of the pauldron, for example, and we see there's absolutely nothing there. There's no beginnings of padding or anything. Like she's really just wearing the stuff on her skin. So, yikes. And she did all the other things I said could be done to minimize the obvious weakness while she benefits from the legit advantages. What did you say? I didn't see what you mentioned specifically. I mean, what are the advantages? What are the advantages of presenting like almost your entire chest as a target? And of course the legs are bare, because why wouldn't they? She's got to show off, right? One thing I hate is oversized weapons the size of 3 people stacked on top of each other. There are big weapons in history, but they were functional. Yeah. Yeah, when they get like super ludicrously, like to the point where even if they were made of some kind of super strong magic alloy, whatever the hell, they would still be so bulky that it would be really hard to fight with them. Thanks, Dan Dragon. Look up Artoria and Arthur Pendragon from Fate. Okay. Okay, yeah, that's a much better way to do sort of gendered armor. See here. This, what the hell is it? Why you no work? No, not this window. I adjusted it right before I started. Where is it now? Come on. Okay. Just a second. There, that should be it. There we go. Yeah. Yeah. That's overall a better way of doing it. Because they have basically the same armor with some differences. Like, looks like he's getting a little bit more here. Some extra pieces that she doesn't get, but she gets these, you know, giant, well, yeah, looks like those parts are larger. But yeah, that's a way to do it. Don't have a problem with that. A lot of the advantages of fighting without armor. Greater freedom of movement. Well, no, you don't have that. That's the thing. You don't actually have that because, well, now you've strapped stuff onto yourself that's going to bind up and that's going to get in the way. Like, you don't have that advantage. Absolutely not. Particularly also what I don't like about this armor in particular right here. The pauldrons aren't attached to anything. And you want that. Like, generally on armor, the pauldrons are attached to either the undergarment, or, you know, you could like attach the two pauldrons together so that they kind of hold each other up a little bit. And then you've got the other pieces that are then attached to the pauldron. Like, you've got pieces in between that then connect eventually to the vambraces, etc. Like, and you want that because otherwise everything slips around. I've definitely found that out the hard way. You know, one time I got arm armor. Always sounds very dumb, but yeah. And I didn't have any way to attach it, so it just kept shifting around and kind of slipping down, and it was pretty annoying. So that's not the case. That's going to be a major irritant. And then, like, the elbows as well. Elbows are a big problem. Like, in sparring, you always want to have elbow guards, because even light attacks that hit there are going to be devastating to the joint. So not just skipping those is pretty dumb. And just, armor is designed to work together. The different pieces are supposed to support each other, and it's not just for protection, it's also for better movement. So this would be really awkward to move in, actually. Not to mention, if you want speed and agility, you actually don't want stuff on your forearms, because I can tell you that it makes quite a difference. Like, even just steel gauntlets make a difference for how fast you can move your arms and how exhausting it is to do so. So this is just, it's just done in all the wrong ways. Thanks, Senior Sticks and Chad Manigan. I have an idea. Instead of a super large sword, you have a normal sized weapon, and you can perform a spell that increases the size but also the weight. So you can do massive sweeps to take out multiple enemies at once. That is a thing. You see that every now and then. Isn't there... Well, okay, I mean, in Elden Ring, that's a spell. Like, it doesn't actually elongate the physical sword, but it's a magic sword that you can beef up in size and then swing that. Yeah, that's a pretty good concept overall. Thanks, Mantaris, if I pronounced that correctly. You know what grinds my gears? It's when heroes cut through plate armor like butter. What is the point of armor at that point? Yeah, that's exactly also one of my main issues with it. Absolutely. It's one of the worst fantasy tropes Like, why even bother? Why even show armor if anyone can cut through it with a butter knife, right? Like, it's stupid. I mean, one of the worst recent examples was from the Wheel of Time series, where a thrown dagger pierces a breastplate. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Thanks, Alfie Smith. Thoughts on Urumi? I've seen it a lot in fantasy, but I've always seen it as a niche weapon that's more dangerous to the user than the enemy in most settings. Short answer is I pretty much agree with you. Another short answer, watch my video on the topic. I've made a video about the Urumi. I think it's titled something like an unnecessarily long or unnecessarily in-depth discussion of the Urumi or of flexible swords or something like that. Should be pretty easy to find. I found a website that actually lists a bunch of tropes, fantasy tropes, and how to rewrite it better. And yes, this is definitely also a pet peeve of mine. This is one that I'm really tired of. Why does it always have to be the chosen one? Why does it always have to be fate? And it's like, I mean, I know why. Like, particularly in games, like Elder Scrolls and whatnot. You're supposed to be the grand king of badasses who can do anything and who can defeat anyone. And the funny thing is, this is kind of a love-hate thing for me, because I do actually also like the trope of a super powerful, doesn't even have to be hero, like a character, like a totally overpowered character. And in fact, I like when they just leave it at that, because the stereotype usually is there's this super OP character, whether it be John Wick or some other legendary swordsman or something like that. They're always like insurmountable. You can't defeat them, and they just plow through hordes of enemies and just no problem, no sweat. But then they always end up in this situation where they get completely beaten up and they have to come back from the brink of death, or sometimes they literally die and have to come back. Have to come back from serious defeat and all of that. They go through trials and tribulations and everything, which of course is part of this standard story arc. I actually like when they stick to it. I actually like when they're like, okay, here's this overpowered character, like One Punch Man, for example. That's kind of part of the appeal. It's just, okay, there's this straight up, pretty much invincible character. And no twists and turns. It's just like, yeah, this character kicks ass. And anytime they show up, it's going to be a massacre. And I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Like, even though I don't like the chosen hero sort of thing, I do like overpowered characters. Because those two don't come together. I mean, they can. They don't have to converge. They often do. Like, usually the chosen hero is... I'm not sure if the chosen one is more often borderline invincible or more often just the kind of character who rises to the occasion and grows with the challenge. I think that might be more common. Either way. What I would like for the next Elder Scrolls, or similar kind of game, I mean, next Elder Scrolls, as if that's ever going to happen, but, the next game in this sort of style that I would really love to see would be more of a Morrowind sort of start. Not necessarily endgame, because you turn into a demigod and blah, whatever. But like this sort of start where you're just some random schmuck, like you're not the chosen one, but the game still gives you plenty of leeway. Like, you can still become overpowered. You can still take on a small army by yourself, but you can do whatever the hell you want. You don't have to be the savior, or, you don't have to go through this standard blah, blah, everybody, the chosen one. You can just be the nameless stranger or whatever, who is super overpowered but does, whatever they want, or whatever you want, rather. Like, you can ignore, like, you're not being railroaded through a main quest line. You can just go and have fun, and that'd be neat. I like that. Whereas the Chosen One thing is just so worn out. It's been done like bazillions of times, and there's no life left in it anymore. You know what I mean? At least that's my opinion. All right, enough monologuing for now. Otherwise, I'll turn into a villain with all the monologuing. Anyway, thanks, Cody. How different would the death rate of a fantasy world be compared to ours? Interesting. Also, the worst trope is originality. It's so easy to get wrong. I wouldn't call that a trope, but yeah, if you're just trying to force it to be special, then yeah, that can definitely go wrong. What would the death rate be? I mean, I would say in a lot of fantasy worlds, it's much higher. Like, particularly if you have the usual, because along with the Chosen One also comes the grand threat, where like something, be it Sauron or Reapers in Mass Effect, or like some big overwhelming force that comes along and wants to destroy everything, and they have to fight this desperate struggle against an overpowered foe that outnumbers them, etc. And there's a shit ton of people who die, like both soldiers and civilians. They're like entire villages or sometimes even cities being razed to the ground and burned down, and this and that and the other. There's like, the casualty rate is insane, to the point where sometimes you're like, how does the population even come back from this? Like, I would say sometimes it's quite a bit higher. But again, depending on the setting, it might also be a lot lower. Anyway, thank you very much, chat, man. Highly appreciate the very generous super chat. Working on a fantasy story where humans have an ability to use telekinesis, but it's rare, and there was a magical purge, so it's even more rare, and something happens to the main character's friend, and he completely levels an orc stronghold. All right. That can work pretty well. I mean, you could... This like super rare ability that somebody has, this may sometimes coincide with the Chosen One, or kind of may feed into it or whatever, but you can also do it independently of that. It can also sometimes be, I mean, most often it's the reluctant hero, which is another trope. But yeah, I do like some settings where somebody has a super powerful ability, but they can't quite control it, and sometimes it goes haywire. I mean, at the same time, I guess this has also been a little bit overused at this point, where we've seen that a lot. The character has like an uncontrollable power, and they've killed somebody they didn't mean to, maybe like a friend or family member. They've been devastated and sworn to never use it, and then like this big threat comes along, and they are forced to, and eventually, with the power of friendship, they trust in themselves, and now they can control it after all. And like, okay, that's also pretty cliche, but it can be done well. What if the Chosen One is the villain? I don't think I've seen that in this sort of way. Well, it depends a little bit on how you interpret it. Because if you think about it, Ganondorf is the chosen villain, right? Because like Link and Ganondorf always do this back and forth. Like, they're bound by fate. They keep, like, Link keeps being reincarnated and whatnot, but he always has to fight the same battle. So one could argue that Ganondorf, or Ganon, whichever one it is the chosen villain, sort of. And I think I've seen it done where somebody is like thinks they're the chosen one, that the prophecy is referring to them, but then it turns out it's somebody else and they actually turn into the villain. Thanks, Senor Sticks. What do you have against wrist protection? Are you Jedi? Yes, clearly. Yeah, well, wrist protection is... I mean, hand protection is arguably more important, but yeah, if it comes with the package, then it's not a bad thing. It's just, if you want to commit to the agility and speed from not wearing armor, then just do that. Thanks, Frybeer. I'd strongly dislike villains who feel the need to gloat and explain their plans to the hero they caught. Why not just shoot the good guy? Yes. That is one that I absolutely hate too. That is a very common trope. I mean, at least stories have generally become more self-aware. Like sometimes you see that come up, and either the villain just straight up just goes for it, or just the villain catches themselves with, oh, I'm monologuing, aren't I? Pfft, done. Or some other kind of jab at this trope. Yeah, it's been around for a long time after all. Thanks, Alfie. Magic should have a cost, like months/years of life, which explains why elves can live so long, because they can innately magic race, right? Sometimes you have that in the way that they have to, they can't use mana, but they have to cast with their life force. So if they use magic too much, they risk literally killing themselves, or falling unconscious or into a coma or something like that. Thanks, Frank. Do you have suggestions for a good mid-range battle axe? As in reach, not price. Oh. I think Arms and Armor has an axe that's like sort of intermediate length. It's like not a full Dana, like it's intended to be a single-handed axe generally, but it could be used with two, and it has a bit more range, or reach, I mean. Let me check. I don't know, maybe. This is sort of mid-sized in some ways. It's not as long as I remember, but... Isn't that kind of a guy experience? It's not as long as I remember. Anyway, yeah, this one here. I think that's kind of an intermediate sort of... Like, it's designed as a single-handed one, but it's fairly large for that. I don't know. Maybe that. All right, so other tropes. Wait, I think it was just... Oh, not the... Yeah, okay, yeah, not the Arms and Armor Dane axe. Yeah, I know. That's a different one. Other tropes. The Secret Heir. Yeah, that is super overused. The Evil Overlord. Yeah, I generally prefer villains or anti-heroes or... Anti-villain? What's an anti-villain? Because it's an anti-villain is one that has some redeeming qualities or something. I generally prefer when the antagonists, let's put it that way, have more of a nuanced motivation. Not just, I am evil for the sake of evilness, like Sauron, but more like they have some kind of misguided sense of right and wrong, or I don't know, disturbed by something that happened or whatever. They have complex, devious goals and ideals and all of this. Like where you can kind of root for them a little bit, or at least have some sympathy. That's usually a better villain. Thanks. Wildberry Flop Giant. Wow. Is it true that the Khopesh was used more like an axe than a sword? No, I don't think so. It's not very axe-like. I mean, if you look at the typology, it seems like it evolved from an axe because there are several types where you can kind of follow it along. And it seems to have turned into that. It's just the Khopesh in its final form doesn't really, there's nothing really axe-like about it in particular. So I wouldn't say so. It's kind of like a modified saber, you know. Thanks, Cody. Another painful trope is no killing policies. Characters who don't kill just because only evil kills. I have mixed feelings about that. Because on the one hand, yeah, I can see that. Sometimes it gets a bit lame. I think in case of Batman, it makes sense, like specifically because the idea is he doesn't do it, like he sticks to his strict moral code because he has enough self-awareness to realize where he might end up if he crosses the line. Because he has all this anger and hate inside of him that he has to struggle with. And it's very easy for him to lose control. And basically, like, his guidelines, his moral code is what separates him from the Punisher. If he abandons that, if he crosses that line, he's going to be the Punisher. And he doesn't want that. So it makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is the way that nobody else takes care of the Joker either. I mean, there are some scenarios where somebody else kills him, but like, you'd think at some point Gotham City, like the authorities in Gotham City would just decide, okay, even if they don't have a death penalty, they might just decide, you know what, he needs to go. He keeps escaping, he keeps killing so many people, he needs to be executed. Or even just if somebody is not quite as high and righteous and morally pure, who just straight up hire someone to kill him in his cell or something and then cover it up. Like, you'd think something would happen, right? You'd think that this should not be placed squarely and exclusively on Batman's shoulders. That's what I'm thinking. And of course also it depends on the version of Batman. Some versions do kill. Or at least, like, there's also a difference between, like, do you intentionally kill someone or do you just end up doing a lot of damage in fighting and people just happen to die because sometimes you just can't control it, you know? I mean, it can be difficult. Like, I imagine Batman would probably sometimes end up just unintentionally breaking someone's neck or fracturing their skull to the point where they can't get to the hospital quickly enough and they just die of brain hemorrhaging or whatever. At that point, like, that's not premeditated murder, it's just like accidental. But yeah, I think there are cases where it does make sense. Sometimes it's a little bit overused, but the morally pure hero versus the villain who attempts to corrupt them is a very worn out old trope, but I think it still works. Like, there's certain things that just kind of, that are a good theme or have a good effect on the audience that, like, you don't have to change everything, right? Like, you don't have to, just because there's a trope that's been used a lot doesn't mean that you have to do everything to avoid it. You can never use it because it's been done too much. Like, you can still do a compelling or create a compelling story and characters with tropes that are common and have been used a lot. Thanks, lol. Can you check out Taylor Herbert's Spider Silk armor from the web serial Worm and read up on it? It's one of my favorite armor from fiction. Okay. Spider Silk armor. What's this? Yeah, I would have to read up on it because just seeing it right now, I can only go by the looks. This looks kind of gross. Are there... What is this? Are there a bunch of spiders floating around it? Or what is this? What's going on there? That's kind of a creepier version of the Diablo 2 Necromancer armor. You know what I mean? It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Necromancer bone armor. Not quite, but somewhat. That one looks more like kind of superhero stylized. Yeah, but I can't say too much about it because I know nothing about it. Thanks, Frank. I'm surprised that no one has tried to blow Joker's head off at this point. I mean, I'm pretty sure people have tried. Yeah, Superman is another example. Doesn't kill. And I guess also for the same reason, really. At least we've seen storylines, you know, the whole Injustice storyline or, you know, Lords of Justice and all this stuff where he does cross the line and he does start a kill and then he just keeps doing it and he just turns into a villain. I think in his case it takes quite a bit. I mean, the way it was done in that storyline is actually pretty convincing. You know, the way that the Joker forced him to kill Lois and have like the Metropolis nuked, basically. Like that's, yeah. If anybody would get to break Superman and make him just lose it and abandon his morals, then it would be the Joker. I think an argument could be made that he should be able to resist that. I think he should have the willpower to not go down that route, but it's still believable that he does. Not killing is easier if you're invincible. Yeah, well, there is that. But his enemies aren't. Or, I mean, he's not against his enemies, rather. I don't really know how to read your username. P-Y-E-It-Me? I have no idea. Legit, but thank you. I hate Destiny, Prophecy, Chosen Ones, Divine, Plot Armor, Thin, Hot Clothes, Zero Protection, etc. I like Screw Destiny, Unchosen, Grounded, Realistic, Common Sense, etc. Although I like sci-fi more than fantasy. Alrighty. Yeah. I do have to say that I don't always like the gritty, grounded sort of deal. Like sometimes I do like the more heroic fantasy with magic and everything. In fact, I like that generally more. And particularly in recent years, I'm not really into either post-apocalyptic shit anymore or dark fantasy. Simply because it's just... The world sucks so much at this point, I don't want to continue seeing other worlds that suck even more. You know what I mean? I want something that's a little bit more positive quite often. So, like, a lot of dark fantasy is just too much, you know, everything's like an eldritch horror and shit's mutated and... You know, people are just struggling to survive. They're almost extinct, and they have to fight all these hideous abominations, and everything is gross. And it just no, thank you. I used to like that, but not anymore. Now it's just like too much. And also, if it's too much, just extremely grounded, like there's no magic, there's, basically it's just, it's kind of like Middle Ages with a twist. I do need a bit more than that in my fantasy as well. I generally do like magic in it. There are very different ways of doing it. There are some more almost scientifically minded versions of magic where you have like a very fleshed out hard magic system like Brandon Sanderson does. It might as well be sci-fi or technology, but it is magic. It follows rules though. You know what I mean? That feeling when dystopian stuff stops being a warning and starts looking too much like current events. Yeah. You get what I'm talking about. Exactly. Yeah, and also just grimdark fantasy has also been done so much that you also get kind of tired of it, right? It's like, I don't know. Thanks, Chad, man. He may be super, but he's still a man. Well, he's not human, though. Okay, yeah, you have a point. He grew up on Earth with human parents, so he's, true, like he's physiologically alien, but he's been socialized into human society. But also by, if you think about it, his foster parents are kind of superhuman too. Because we only ever see them be like really morally righteous and wise and nice, and they have no flaws. At least I don't remember ever seeing them like, I don't know, ever being assholes to somebody or to each other or having, I don't know, marital trouble or alcoholism or some kind of flaw. So they seem to be sort of superhuman by themselves. I mean, to be fair, they're old, so some people do age like wine, I suppose, and overcome a lot of their flaws, but others also double down on them and triple down and etc. I don't want to name specific names, but there are certain, fake tanned buffoons who are great examples of that. Anyway, thanks, Easy Night. We had a medieval festival and someone tried to get to the weapons of a medieval reenactment group. Someone belonging to the group hit him and he died? What? That sounds like a crazy story. Citation needed, I guess. I mean, it doesn't seem too hard to believe. It could happen. Wouldn't be a great idea. As like just a visitor, just trying to. And when you're told no, you can't just touch our stuff, and they do it anyway. Probably shouldn't be hit with a weapon, but yeah, Florida man, that sounds like it. Thanks again, Senior Sticks. Why are Jedi against wrist protection and or guards? Why is Kylo Ren the closest thing to having a guard? Well, I think this is really a design issue because I was just thinking about that just yesterday and today. Like if I was to design a lightsaber, what would I do? And then I was thinking like some sort of hand protection. The problem is like you would need something lightsaber resistant, so Beskar or Cortosis, which from what I understand, the Mandalorians don't trade with the Jedi. So they probably wouldn't get that straight up. So what else do you do if you put a bunch of plasma next to your hand as a protection? That's still kind of threatening your hand, right? And the more you have there, the more you have to watch out. Like you can hit yourself sometimes with a crossguard of a sword, right? You shouldn't, but it happens sometimes. And if you do that with a lightsaber, well, you're in trouble. So I think that's pretty difficult, actually. I'll see if I can figure something out, but not easy. Thanks, Miss Ebola. I hope you're not too affected by the whole Rogers ordeal. No, not really. I've just been paying with a Visa, which works. To anyone who doesn't know, Rogers has had an outage, and now debit transactions don't work anymore, and a few other things. So yeah, it's pretty stupid, but I haven't specifically been affected by that. Why do you think so many cases of media portray plate armor as weak as paper? That's a good question. I think it's probably just because they don't know how armor is actually defeated. Like they're unaware of techniques and strategies to use against armor. So they're just like, well, how do you defeat armor? I guess you just gotta hit it harder, right? Or you gotta have some kind of super sword. That's probably the thing. Yeah, actually, why are stormtroopers even wearing armor? Because have we seen any case where stormtrooper armor actually protects from anything? Like, obviously it doesn't protect against lightsabers, but it doesn't seem to protect against blaster fire either. It's like, what does it protect against? It's like, in the rare cases that they fight somebody who uses slug throwers, like outdated firearms, what is it? I don't know. Is it just a uniform? No idea. Happy to tell you I'm not like grounded and gritty due to 2022 situation. So would you make a video about arms, armor, and gear from Red Rappi's Disney show Amphibia in the future? I'm not aware of that. Don't know what that is. P.S. I like Gate anime, but it's US. What? I don't know. I don't know what that means. Sorry. Thanks, Easy Night. The guy who hit the other was in complete plate. That's questionable then. Like if you're walking around armored with a weapon and somebody's trying to touch your stuff who's unarmed, at least I'm assuming I don't know if he had already picked something up at that point, but either way, this might be a bit unreasonable to just hit the guy in the head or whatever. Yeah. A little bit. Canonically, Stormtrooper armor absorbs some of the energy of the blast. So while the troopers are incapacitated, they usually survive a blast or shot. Okay, that actually makes sense. Thanks for clearing that up. That I can see. Okay. So, what tropes do you actually like? I've already mentioned the one with the like super overpowered character who just mows through enemies and no problem. Let me see. Are there any in this list here that I like? Reluctant Hero, not really. Lucky Novice. Oh, right. This one I really hate, but I'm trying to look for. Okay, let's keep that in the back of our minds. But the Mentor I'm okay with. Like, it's super overused, but I don't mind it. World that never progresses. I mean, you can easily solve that by just not letting that much time pass, but yeah, it's kind of weird. Pseudo-European medieval setting, yeah, that's pretty standard. Powerful artifact. Yeah, definitely worn out trope. Homogeneous species. Yeah, that's a weird one. True. Okay, there's one way in which I like this. The homogeneous species trope. Which is if we have something better than humans. You know, something that's like a species that's actually crazy thought, gets so long and doesn't constantly fight itself, you know? like a species where they live in peace. They're not constantly in conflict. They're not warfaring. They're not aggressive. They're not like scamming each other and constantly screwing each other over and lying and competing in toxic ways and this and that. I like that, actually. Yeah, elves quite often, not always. And in fact, it does bother me when we get elves. They're like, on the one hand, they seem pretty harmonious and everything, but on the other hand, then you find out, oh yeah, they used to have major wars in the past, or there are still some some factions that splintered off and are opposed to one another or whatever. But yeah, sometimes elves are like that. I tend to like synthetic life forms in sci-fi. Like in Mass Effect, I really like the Geth. In fact, it's a pretty awesome model. The way the different units build consensus by exchanging their different points of view and processing information and all of this. This is like an actual functional democracy, basically, which is pretty cool. And I also like. Well, I like the Kalon in Orville until they became the villains. But yeah, that sort of thing. Like they're better than human, and they actually get along, and they're not stupid, and that's good. I like villains that are relatable and have a reason that can make sense versus I'm gonna be evil because evil. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier in the stream. Definitely, I prefer that. For sure. Thanks, Tokay Gecko. I love a super charismatic Disney-style villain. Oh yeah. Disney actually does villains quite well, for the most part. Thanks, Mentaurus. For some reason, the loser hero is pretty good, I think, like Kung Fu Hustle. Oh yeah, that can be entertaining for sure. I don't like the nerd who gets the babes trope like you see in anime. Oh, yeah, anime also does this other weird thing where like there's like this super attractive, usually female character who's so lonely because nobody likes her, and she's like supposedly a wallflower. It's like, huh? It's like, how is this a wallflower? In what kind of world? Like what absurd standards do you have? It's like, it's like some super hot girl's OnlyFans has followers simply for the reason because they pity her because she's so lonely and unattractive. Like, huh? Excuse me? Anyway, please review Forgotten Ruin book series by Jason Ansbach and Nick Cole, as it's about 21st century, 2030 U.S. military as an army in distant future dominated by magic using fantasy species factions. Okay. That sounds interesting, thank you. Never heard of it, but sounds pretty neat. Problem is I don't have time to read anything these days. I mean, I do, but it's generally nonfiction because I'm trying to like optimize my time use. It's got to be like self-improvement books and time management and all this kind of boring shit just to get through my everyday. Yeah, audiobooks I also can't do too much anymore. I used to listen to audiobooks all the time, but ever since I got hit by a car, at their fault, didn't have actually anything to do with listening to music, but ever since then I don't do that anymore because I want to be able to perceive everything around me. I always look around and listen out, and I'm just always assuming everybody's out to try to kill me. which serves me well generally. Thanks, Chell. Fantasy worlds should escape sexism / gender roles / homophobia / etc. My work has reasonable versions of bootplate, code armies, and gay characters. Yeah. I think it makes perfect sense for that to be pretty standard, because, like, why would they? Why would they do the same stupid shit we do? Right? Like, why can't we create a better world? That's kind of nice. But then it's woke. It's woke. I heard a really good point made. Who was it again? Oh yeah, Amazing Atheist pointed it out just recently. That, like, if Alien came out nowadays, people would call it woke. Because the chick is the main hero and actually does military stuff. It's so woke. It's like, yeah, everything is woke now. That's just... Anyway. Thanks, Mordred. Seems like about 80% of all fantasy anime are set in a fictional version of the Holy Roman Empire. Really? Is it that common? I thought kind of pseudo-medieval was still the standard, but I also haven't seen that much anime, so I'm not sure. Why not, though? Even if there's magic, doesn't mean people would change. They wouldn't have to change, they could just be different to begin with. That's the thing, like, you can create the world any way you want, so... I think you're misinterpreting woke, but we can disagree. Well, I think a lot of people misinterpret woke, those who use it and criticize it, because I've seen exactly this sort of sentiment about all kinds of things. Where it's like, what? A black main character? Woke. Like, anyway. Let's not get too political here. Politics suck. Thanks, Frybeer. A trope I like is when a super villain tells the hero, "Nice you came here to defeat me before the fake countdown, but I put my plan into action already yesterday and you can't stop it now." Yeah. Like smart villains who are efficient. One of my favorite jokes about the HRE as a historian, it was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Yes. True. That's a pretty standard joke. Very true, though. Thanks, Chad, man. This stream is sponsored by Audible. No, not really. This is not sponsored by Audible. No, it's not. I'm so sorry I made this joke while you were talking about the car. Oh, yeah. The car accident. Well, bicycle accident. But it was a car that hit me. Anyway. I like the never bring what to what fights, such as never bring melee weapons, such as swords, to most firearm fights, as seen in Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Show revolver, KO, sword. KO is putting it nicely, yeah. Anyway, thank you. I still don't know how to pronounce your username. Can you help me out there? Wokeness is definitely a thing, but it gets way overused. I can agree with that. Sure. Respawning mechanic integrated in the story is a trope I like, especially when there is a cost. Yeah. It's not one of my favorites, but it can be interesting if done well. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the best part, that the scene was actually improvised. It was supposed to be an actual fight, but Harrison Ford was he was sick and it was stupidly hot, and they were just like, screw it, just get it over with. This scene needs to end now. In fiction, I hate when they don't show the full brutality of the weapons. Like, what's the point of a giant sword if it acts like a regular sword? Yeah. It's a pretty difficult line to walk, because on the one hand, I don't like when war is totally downplayed and it's like, people get hit by weapons and they just lay down on the ground and just look like they're asleep or whatever. It's like, okay. On the other hand, I also don't like when they crank it up to over 9,000 and just go super gratuitous, ridiculous. Like, Hellsing is very guilty of that, in my opinion. Like, Hellsing does a lot of gratuitous violence that's just for its own sake. Just make it as shock value, as ridiculously brutal, splattery, gore fest, crazy shit as you can. And that's too edgelord, I have mixed feelings about that one. Like, on the one hand, I do think it's good when the actual horror of war is shown in a more down-to-earth way. On the other hand, I also like stuff like, for example, Symphony of War, the Nephilim saga, which I've been playing lately. I mentioned it in the other stream, where you can get cannons and gunners in very small numbers because you just don't have that many resources, and it's just the thing of, you see like the cannons fire and there's like this big explosion, splash damage, but everybody just takes some HP damage, and then they disappear when they're defeated. Or you can also force them to surrender, and it's like, it's abstracted, it's kind of silly. But on the other hand, I also sort of like it because it's not as fucked up as real world. At the same time, it kind of is, though, if you go by the story. If you go by what's happening, it is actually pretty grim. Anyway. It's Peter Yim. Oh, okay. I would not have guessed that at all. So I'm just going to call you Peter then, I guess. Wish for why firearms and gunpowder weapons are good ideas in fantasy settings video soon. Okay. That would be an opportunity to reference Symphony of War, which is lately just pretty quickly turned into one of my favorite games, so I wouldn't mind sharing the love a little bit, so to speak. Just letting people know about it. Okay. I hate how video game characters can heal from damage at all. If you get damaged, it will take weeks to heal fully. Yeah, but that's a case where I'm totally fine with it, because it would be incredibly tedious. And in fact, some games are worse in that. Like, some games you can't really heal directly, but basically you just bandage and then you wait for very slow, gradual health regeneration over time, which is just, it's so damn tedious. Usually it's too much for me. Like, then you can't use the character for a while, or you have to be super careful, or whatever. Or then they start eating 3 cheese wheels and shit like that. It's also kind of dumb. So, I am in favor of healing magic. The thing where villains kill people working for them because they're sending a message or some shit. Oh, yeah, I hate that so much. Like, first off, villains constantly abusing their minions and henchmen, and then they act surprised when there's a rebellion or mutiny or whatever, right? It's like, what? how could you turn against me? I have always treated you well. No, you haven't. You have, like, randomly killed people for just failing a quest or whatever, and you're just constantly abusing them and sending them on suicide missions and not rewarding them at all, and then you're like surprised that they're not loyal. I actually prefer when the villain is charismatic and actually manages to generate genuine loyalty in the followers. Not only does it make more sense, it's also more interesting. An exception to that is when I think about the She-Ra remake, Hordak in that. He's like, he wasn't downright abusive or threatening to have people executed for failing simple tasks or whatever, but he was pretty... He did not generate loyalty for the most part. He was pretty bad as a leader in that regard, and definitely had disgruntled followers / employees or whatever. But in that case, it made sense because he just single-mindedly and recklessly pursued his goal, and he just wanted to just get it done, and he had tunnel vision basically on his goal. So he just was too unaware of that, which that makes sense. But like somebody who's just... It depends a little bit, because ruling with an iron fist is a thing. Like, you can either rule through loyalty or through fear, and fear usually backfires, but it's the easier thing to do, right? Like, you still need to surround yourself like with a core of actually loyal followers who carry out your orders. But yeah, once further down, the hierarchy can be ruled with fear. Thanks, Senior Sticks. Etsy has some unique weapons like a runic axe. Etsy has all kinds of stuff. It's full of very creative people, for sure. Runic axe. Yeah, there's some nicely decorated ones for sure. Why not both loyalty and fear? That is one way to do it, like reward and punishment. What's the word? Carrot and stick. That can work. Although, if you go by like scientific research, like psychology, reward is more effective than punishment for eliciting certain behaviors. Let's put it that way. I don't really like elves. They're just pretty people with pointy ears. They're too similar to humans and they're boring. When they are too similar to humans, I don't like them either. But usually they aren't. I would actually argue that elves are quite a bit different generally, because they have a different sort of philosophy and societal structure and, different magic. Or sometimes access to magic at all, and they're attuned to nature, etc. There's a lot of things that humans aren't, and in fact, in some settings they are like diametrically opposed, where you have like the technology using nature destroying humans, and then the elves who are the counterpart, who are in tune with nature and try to protect it and preserve it and all that. Real life. Use everything you got and still cannot be enough. Or can be not enough. Yeah, it's the trope of you just gotta reach down far enough, like deep down, and willpower is gonna see you through it. I mean, it's a very nice story device. It's very satisfying for the audience. Yeah. It's not how real life works, but at the same time, we do watch fantasy because we want to see the things that we don't get in real life, right? So, yeah. I generally do like settings that are a little bit more weighted more heavily on the positive side of the scale, like where there's more of a sense of justice, maybe, or reward for good deeds, maybe something like that. Whereas in real life, the more of a scumbag you are, the more successful you likely are. The more exploitative you are, the more ruthless you are, the more successful you often tend to be, as long as you have enough charisma to pull it off as well. That's kind of how real life works, sadly. Fantasy trope I don't like is having an OP magical skill and only use it once and never again. Good point, yes. Like anything, like they have this enormously powerful tool in their arsenal and they use it once and that's it, never again. It's like, huh? What? Like you could literally end the entire conflict or the war or whatever with what you have and you're not going to. Why exactly? Explain. You know? It's just kind of bizarre, I think. Although I do like when it's done in a way, like for example, they have this enormously potent weapon that could end the conflict, but it comes at a price. Or sometimes it's the seduction of the virtuous hero by this thing, you know, like the ring, or any kind of other weapon that has unintended consequences, that has some corrupting influence, or that does more harm, or maybe not more harm than good, but also a lot of harm. Or like you have to commit some kind of immoral act to get it in the first place. Like you have to take it away from someone who needs it for just living or whatever, right? There's a number of ways in which you can do that. Road to hell is paved with good intentions trope. Yeah. I mean, this is a little bit closer to reality, but it can definitely be overdone, for sure. I dislike the lack of headgear. Yeah, it's like always a full suit of plate armor, and then where's your helmet? What are you doing? What the hell? What's going on? That's a thing. I think the problem is that by definition, anything in a fantasy story is a trope, because the structure of fantasy storytelling was built around tropes, or else people would say it's not fantasy. Huh. That's an interesting idea there. It really depends on how do you define a trope. Let me actually look that up. I should have probably done that right to start with. Like, what's the official definition? Let's say like Merriam-Webster, for example. Okay, a common or overused theme or device, also a cliche. I do think the emphasis is on overused here. I think it's not, because otherwise it would just be a theme, right? Like certain things in fantasy, like for example, the existence of magic or of heroic characters or things like that. Those are themes, not necessarily tropes. Like it's a trope when like the chosen one is a trope because it's been done to death. it's also a theme. Like you definitely have some overlap. Like the Chosen One is a theme of fantasy, but it's also a trope because of just how ubiquitous and excessively used it is. But you still have a point. Like definitely a lot of tropes are part of fantasy, for sure. It's what makes it that. Thanks, Adam. My most hated trope is that human kingdoms are jack of all trades. They should have specializations like the best cavalry in the world or best tech. Often that's the only thing that humans have going for them. It's like, oh, well, they're adaptable. They can do all kinds of things. Which is like, okay, yeah, when you think about it, when humans are the default, then where else do you go with that, right? If you have other species that are highly specialized, like dwarves are miners and great fighters and blah, whatever. Elves are wise magic users, etc., whatever. Then what do you do with humans? I mean, what do humans really excel at by nature? If you ask me, violence. That's like our trademark. Humans excel at violence, at warfare, at aggression, at just fucking each other up. Damn it. One F-bomb should be okay. This stream for a change, I did monetize. Normally I don't. So that means normally I can swear as much as I want, but not now, I guess. Anyway, I don't even know why I did that, because monetizing streams generally does pretty much nothing. Makes almost no difference. Anyway, thanks, Frank. Is it weird to use a weapon as security blanket? A little bit. A little bit, but, you know, everybody has their own eccentricities, right? People are easily corruptible. What do you mean, in fantasy or in real life? In real life, it's like, I don't even think corruptible is the thing. It's just, in real life, everybody has good and bad traits. Everybody has flaws. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. It's just that sometimes the balance is off. In fact, a lot of times there is no balance. Well, I don't know, actually. I have no idea if we can talk about generally there being some sort of balance or if it's often tipped or whatever. Whatever. Humans are a complex mix, a bag, a miserable little pile of secrets, you know? It's more like a miserable little pile of prejudice and of biases, actually. That's a better way to put it. Humans are a miserable little pile of biases because everybody has biases. A whole stack of them. That's just how it is. Can't really say what humans excel at since there's no other humanoid species for comparison. That's very true, yeah. It's just that if you look throughout history, what's the red thread? Red thread, right? War, atrocities, torture, violence, over and over and over again. I mean, I suppose that's also my bias because my brain tends to latch onto the negatives more, because you can also say that what's the main theme running through history? Ingenuity, you know, invention, creating things. Yeah, it's creation and destruction. Those two keep competing. Thanks, Chad, man. If you're going to do a trope, try to modify the trope to make it feel fresh. Yeah. The story I'm writing, the human race is the best non-magical warriors with some of the best technology in the world because they made guns. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good way to do it. We say we're the smartest animals, but we're still stupid. We're reckless. I think that's the main problem. It's like we don't really know how to use our intelligence the most productive way. I mean, yeah, in some ways, sure, but there's always some catch. There's always, whenever we try to do something positive, whatever we build up, we just knock it right over when we turn around to do the next thing. It's like it always comes at a cost. There's always regression, and there's always, destruction as well. Like we're too smart for our own good, sort of. Like we're smart enough to make nuclear weapons, but we aren't smart enough to not having done so, basically. Right? I mean, like we were smart enough to create nuclear weapons, but we weren't smart enough to just create nuclear reactors without even weaponizing this shit. That would have been a smart thing to do. But nah. We're also not smart enough to overcome our differences. It's like now would be the best time. Now we're facing a global threat in the form of climate change. And what is everybody doing? Bickering. Bickering, fighting, no unity. When it's needed the most, just nah. Why should I do this? Why should I make sacrifices? What about the others? And the others say the same thing and point at you and like, no, we're not going to do the first step. Let them do it. It's like, yeah, as a species, we're hella stupid. For sure. We can be individually smart and we have a certain collective intelligence that creates marvelous things. But we're also collectively really dumb at the same time. Mr. Beast is added though. At what? Thanks, Dan Dragon. Wish you all the best. I watched lots of your videos and they taught me many things about history and weaponry. Thank you. Well, thank you for watching them. And glad to know. Are retcons a trope? No, I don't think so. Retcon is just an external thing that you impose upon the story. It's more like, well, we screwed up along the way, so let's just kind of change it. And then screw it up even more. I hate it when a character loses a limb, but the story glosses over the recovery. You mean like the Luke Skywalker thing? Like where his hand gets cut off and it doesn't matter? Because he just gets a replacement hand pretty much right away and it's just, no big deal. Yeah. I mean, in that universe, sure, it's not that big of a deal. Thanks, Chad, man. Mr. Beast planted 20 million, yes, millions of trees in 2020 and cleaned millions of pounds of trash out of the ocean in 2021 via donations. $1 equals 1 tree / 1 pound of trash. That is very commendable indeed. When elves are just humans but better. Pretty much, yeah. They're wiser, and they're actually capable of living like in a symbiosis with nature rather than as a parasite, and they're more attractive and more physically capable and etc. Yes. Don't criticize humanity's reaction to climate change unless you're making the sacrifices you want everyone else to make. Here's the thing. Recycling, which I do, but individual things are not gonna cut it here. This is a systemic problem. This is an industry problem. And I am willing to make sacrifices like, increase, the prices have already been going crazy anyway, but like increase prices or increase taxes or whatever to actually fix things. What I want is I don't want my tax money to be wasted on some bullshit that like nobody needs, like subsidies for big ass companies or bailing out banks or overblown military budget or etc., various things that just are wasted. Or building the next fucking luxury hotel or whatever for like a tiny minority to benefit from, whatever, things like that. And there's a lot that needs to change where individuals have very little impact. I mean, we're making the choices that we can make on an individual basis, within certain boundaries. Like, I'm gonna have to run my computer quite a bit because that's the work I do. It is what it is. But I still try to save power as much as possible, use greener alternatives for transportation, etc. But I can't do anything about Russia, for example. Like Russia not playing with the rest of the world, and China too, in terms of just the governments of the world need to come together and they need to put their differences aside and try to figure something out to collaborate and change things on a grand scale. This is not something that individuals can do. There are things we can do, but it's just not enough. I hope that clarifies my stance. In my story, the main character meets an elf and is shocked because the king promoted a lot of propaganda against all magical creatures, as well as wiping them out, and the elf is totally different than he thought he knew. Yeah, isn't that the thing in Dragon Prince, pretty much? That's, yeah. I've seen a number of times where it's like, oh yeah, the evil whatever, be it elves or something else, and then you actually meet them and talk to them, and you're like, whoa, they're actually not evil. What is this? I've been brainwashed by propaganda. Note that will lead to centralized control, which is always bad on a large scale. I can't quite disagree. It unfortunately often ends up being that way. But the problem is the way it's happening right now is not working, like straight up. There is not enough collaboration. There is not enough effort, global effort to fix this shit. Thanks, Salve Monezvol, if I read that correctly. Same with chipmunks. I think I lost you somewhere on the way. Where are the chipmunks coming in? What's happening? Okay, but what about dragons? What about them? What do they do? What do they do now? I mean, dragons are a trope in and of themselves, but yeah. Careful about certain topics. The monetization gremlins are watching. Yeah, I wouldn't want to accidentally end up saying something that could be interpreted as being skeptical of our corporate overlords, now could it? Ooh, that's dangerous territory. Next thing somebody's gonna suggest that big oil is doing shady things, and No. Anyway, thanks, Mordred. In a story I scrapped, humans had the highest stamina but were beaten in all other stats. Ooh. YouTube, please work, damn it. This is the 5th time I've typed. Yikes, what happened? Stamina. Yeah, that makes a certain sense. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that distinguish humans from other animals. Like, we have the stamina. Like, we can't run as fast as a lot of animals, but we can do it for longer. So, yeah, that's kind of a thing. We can't outrun a deer, but we may be able to marathon it to death. Thanks, Griffin. What I would like to see is more fantasy based on early Middle Ages. Oh yeah, it's usually high Middle Ages, right? High or late. It's really a great source of inspiration that doesn't get much attention, apart from Norse. Yeah, that's true. Or you're like me and running just makes you collapse instantly. Yeah, we're talking the ideal. Peak human stamina. I dislike ancient ruins machinery, like wall and door contraptions that still function perfectly despite being hundreds of years old and unmaintained. Yeah, good point. There should be at least stuff should go wrong more often, right? Because usually all the traps still work exactly as intended and the robot sentries do exactly the same thing still. It's like, that should have deteriorated a little bit, shouldn't it? If it even still works at all. Thanks, Raven. Would you rather see a fantasy setting, or wait, is it Reven? Would you rather see a fantasy setting with no magical races, elves, orcs, dwarves, or no humans? I'd rather see no humans, quite frankly, because if it's just humans, it's just not as interesting. It depends. There are plenty of fantasy settings that have only humans that are perfectly good, but if I had to choose, I think I'd rather get rid of the humans. What do you think of the fantasy world where humans, dwarves, orcs, and elves were once the same species, but later time made them different? Not really the biggest fan of that. Although I kind of like the goblinization in Shadowrun. It's kind of a cool idea. Where like suddenly magic is unleashed and you know, courses through the world and changes humans into other subtypes. That's kind of neat, but normally I'm not the biggest fan of that sort of common origin. Thanks, Chad, man. Luckily we have the best of both worlds. Let's go Fruck and Elf. Yeah, elf girls are super sexualized, of course, quite often. For obvious reasons. Sounds like someone just racked a gun. Yeah, that's my sound for text messages. It's a bolt action. Because of course it is. Orc girls for the Chads. Death by Snoo Snoo, huh? I want more sexy orcs. Well, good for you, I guess. I mean, I don't mind them depending on how they're done, but yeah, it's often a bit much. Crack and meth both make their users pretty goblin-y. Yeah, that's a mundane goblinization for sure. Alien women are also hypersexualized. Yeah. I still find it weird that, like, coming up with a species that is all female, and or generally like a species where you have one sex and they're like one of the binary. It's kind of weird. I mean, Mass Effect did that, but Asari, obviously. And then the Orville did it with the Mocklins, where everybody's male. It's kind of weird. Shouldn't they be, I don't know, androgynous or shapeshifters or, I don't know, something. Yeah, I know. Mocklins do have, like, sometimes a female is born, but then they get sex reassignment surgery. What? Isn't there a Cthulhu Mythos dating sim on Steam? Yikes. How about hell no? I'm a nope out of that real hard. There was an asexual alien species on Star Trek Next Generation. Commander Riker fell deeply in love with one of them. Oh, that's another one that would be considered woke now, I guess. No tentacle girls. Hell no. Get out of here with that. No tentacles of any kind, of any description. It's not allowed. I will go Inquisition on that shit. I don't think it matters what the female characters look like. Someone will still find it sexy. Humans have an ability to want to have sex with pretty much everyone. And everything, too. Sometimes they even sexualize inanimate objects. It's just... I guess that's the other thing that really distinguishes humans. Well, okay, not distinguish because it's a mammalian thing, but another thing that humans are really good at, being horny as hell. That is kind of another distinguishing factor, right? We want to mount everything. Everything. Some of us, at least. Devious sexuality, that's definitely a human thing. Yep, Rule 34. If it breeds, we can screw it. Even if it doesn't. It's just... Where there's a hole, there's a way, apparently is the attitude here. But I said that's a mammalian thing, generally. I mean, not that birds don't get pretty desperate to get laid too. Oh, somebody was blissfully ignorant of Rule 34. Good for you. Birds are mental, I guess. So are humans. And a lot of mammals in general. You know about dolphins, right? Dolphins are some devious suckers. I mean, they do some kinky stuff, apparently. And they also get high. They get high of, was this blowfish or something? Yeah. Yeah, they're cute, but they are psychos. I agree. That's a thing. Yeah. Anyway, let me see what other tropes are listed on that site. Wasn't that one that I wanted to come back to? That one, Lucky Novice. That's another one I really hate. Don't you hate it as well? When, like, you have somebody who has, like, never held a sword, and they happen to be the chosen one, or whatever the hell, and then they just figure it out. And, like, sometimes there's somebody who kind of teaches them, but other times they just boom, just figure it out. And, like, they've never gotten, like, proper instruction. They just suddenly can fight. I mean, fight, you know, what passes for fighting in a lot of fantasy settings. But suddenly they're just able to do it. It's like, what? That's not how any of this works. It's like, yeah, I've never picked up a gun, and now I'm just bullseye everything, you know. Handgun bullseye shots at 50 meters, no problem. Sure, because I'm the hero. That's a horrible trope. Basically, Luke Skywalker, dude's never done anything in life, beats up Darth Vader. Yeah, after he gets beat up first. But yeah, it's... In some cases, you can argue that there's just a lot of time being omitted. It's just not done in a clear way. Like, you kind of have to indicate, like, if you want us to know that, like, frickin' several years have passed of intensive training, you kind of got to let us know. Otherwise, we're just going to assume that, okay, it's been, like, a week since the hero got their ass handed to them and now they're a master. Like, something's missing here. And it's pretty annoying. Yeah, 5 minutes music montage and the hero can surpass the villains with years of experience. Either that or, again, they reach deep down inside and they gather their willpower, and then there's the friendship of magic too, and blah, 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 and then they can suddenly do it. Somehow. Yup. Seems legit. The thing is, I don't actually mind the training montage. In fact, training montages are pretty cool if done well. And are good workout motivation, I guess, as well. I do like that. And then at least you get the concept that time is passing and the character is working their ass off to get better, right? Thanks again, Chadman. One way to get that time's gone by are features, scars, facial hair, or you see them training and beat their mentor. Yeah, that's all good. It's all good ways to do it. As opposed to just like, oh, they suddenly, it just clicks. They suddenly just get it. Because sometimes the worst is when it happens literally in the same fight. Like the hero gets their ass beat, and then in the same fight, they keep getting back up, and then suddenly they just get it. And then they win. It's like, what's this, like some kind of, are they getting possessed by the spirit of a master swordsman or something? Is this what's happening? Thanks. Is it actually Raven or Raven? It's going to be difficult for you to tell me in writing, I guess. But yeah, best song for training montage. I'm not going to say Eye of the Tiger because that's just too cliche. Caramel dancing. That'd be a good one. Numa Numa? No, seriously though, it's got to be like some hard-ass grinding metal, right? Industrial metal or something. Oh, Darude Sandstorm. That one. The old Van Damme training montages are him learning to do the splits. Yeah. Because the splits are the main thing you need to be able to beat someone. Punch-Out theme, yeah. Indeed. Or just, just straight up the funeral march. Because you work out so hard, you're literally just going to collapse and die from the exhaustion. Just be realistic. It's a favorite armor from any video game. That's difficult. That's difficult. I really like the suit from Crisis. Like, both functionality and design is really cool too. That's like the first thing that comes to mind. There's a lot of cool armor, but that one is special. Do you believe in ghosts or anything considered supernatural? No. Space Marine Terminator armor? Yeah, that's pretty cool too. Fallout Power armor? Sure. I still prefer the Crisis armor over those, but yeah. I mean, you said video game, but if we're going with anything, I can't just not mention Batman's Hell Bat armor. That thing, that's some serious bat-assery. You get it? Oh, bat-ass. That reminds me of this horrible thing with George Clooney. With the bat nipples. The Spider-Man symbiote count as armor? I wouldn't say so. I don't think that's armor. It sort of has a bit of a protective value, but it's not really. Symbiote is not. I mean, you can have armor that also happens to be a symbiote, I guess. I don't like when villains/monsters are unbeatable. At least in Ghostbusters, they've developed the technology to fight ghosts. That's also one of my... It's kind of a related trope. When you have some sort of ghost enemy that is incorporeal, like you can't hurt it at all, but somehow it can hurt you. Like, it can interact with your physical body, but you can't... Like it's a one-way street somehow. And I'd be fine if it does like mental damage in some kind of way, right? But quite often it's just the ghosts just do what looks like a physical attack, and it just goes in one direction only. That's a bit weird. I would rather they pull energy from you. That makes sense. Like if ghosts sort of like do like a life drain. That makes sense. Or if they're energy vampires, I suppose. Tell you horrible dad jokes in the office and boring stories about their kids and stuff. Anyway, I've been streaming for 2 hours. I think it's about time to wrap it up. So, thanks for hanging out. Hope you had fun. Thank you for the super chats. They definitely help out. And I'll see you next time. Have a good weekend.